Hello there. This isn't my normal content, but this is gonna be a chess recap of my tournament I played today. It was a 5 round rapid tournament, and I was playing in section D, the fourth highest rated section, and I was heavily overrated, so I expected to do well. And yeah, so I'm gonna kind of do recaps of my tournaments. If you don't like them, let me know and I will stop because obviously if people don't like them, I'm not going to make the content for them. But without further ado, let's get into the first game. I was playing with the black pieces against a 1593 rated player on Lichess, and let's get into it. He plays e4, I play the French with e6, d5, d4, d5, and knight c3. And against knight c3, obviously against the exchange I'm going to take back. Against knight c3 and knight f3, my plan was to just play this line, or this variation, where you just casually bring the knight around and are going to fight for c5. Essentially, that's the plan. So he brings his bishop out early, which is a little odd. I just play c6, b5, kick out the bishop. And here he goes back, and I was going to play a5, except I decide for b4 instead. Kick out the knight first. A sorry, a5. He plays sorry, a3. I take, and here he takes with the rook, which is obviously a mistake because I just catch it back with the bishop, and I go up in exchange very early on. So here I just develop the bishop and then castle. Pretty simple stuff. I'm just up and winning in this position. And he brings out his bishop. I block, takes, and he brings in his knight. So, okay. I have a very strong bishop here. This knight is pinned, but this bishop is not doing much. It's defended by 2 pieces. This bishop is terrible and sees nothing, and is probably blocked in for the whole game. This knight is going to have trouble developing, but it shouldn't have too much of an issue. And here, white should really be focused on castling. So I go here, defend my pawn that was under attack. I didn't want him to try and go here to start attacking it. So here, I attack his bishop, which is just a clean blunder. I just blundered knight takes e6, which is just a fork of my rook and my queen. So all of a sudden, he's actually just up a pawn. Except I am very active. I'm threatening to win his bishop if I can draw arrows properly. He only has 1 attacker. Or 1 defender, and I have 2 attackers. So he moves the bishop out of the way. And okay, so I develop my knight. Just simple move. He takes my pawn. In my opinion, he should really try and be castling with something like c5 or like something. I don't know, but he needs to castle somehow. I played c4, c5, thinking that if takes, I could take, but then he just kind of trades queens, and I am probably losing. So that wasn't a good move by me. So I go here, defend my pawn, because now it was under attack. And then he blunders the bishop, and I'm like, okay. And again, this also defended my pawn, so he couldn't take again. And here, I force a queen trade because you only have 2 moves here, and one of them gets you mated. So here, I decided not to take because I thought this would be better, like go with a check. And here I just force all the pieces off the board. This is a very fancy move because no matter where you go, you're gonna lose the rook. So if you go here like you did in the game, I go here, fork your rook and king, go here, and here my rook is lost. I can't defend it, so I decide to take his knight. He takes, and I'm up a piece for 3 pawns, except he has double pawns, so it's going to be very difficult for him to make any progress. Important move, I don't allow him to take. He gives me another check. I'm just going to slowly but surely, I trade off the bishops, slowly but surely, win all of his pawns. And I got scared here, but I did calculate correctly. He should have tried to block me out a little bit, but overall, this game is lost. I take his pawn. I sacrifice my knight just to make it easier. And here I use the technique of him not being able to take this pawn, or else this pawn will run. If he ever takes that left pawn, my other pawn will promote, and here he is forced to, and in this position, my opponent resigned the game, putting me at a score of 1-0. Now, I was kind of in a bad mood already because I wanted 3 games with white. There's only 5 rounds in this tournament. And I wanted 3 games with white rather than 3 games with black. But because my first game was with black, that meant that it was probably not going to happen. So, in the next game, I had the white pieces. I'm like, okay, d4. I always play d4. If somehow my opponents are watching this video, I always play d4. Bring what you got. I don't know, man. d4, c4. Or d5, c5. I can English. d5, c4. The queen's gambit is on the board. He plays the Slav. And the Slav is very annoying as a queen's gambit player. I just play knight c3. Here, takes. Knight f3. So here, the game plan is pretty simple. White is going to play mostly on the queen side. Black is going to probably just this, castles, and then go from there. And we get exactly that. Knight out, e3, e6, bishop d2, bishop b5, bishop b4 rather, bishop b5, bishop d7, and castles. So I attack his bishop. I wanted to know what he was going to do, and he gives me the bishop pair, and this was a mistake. This was a mistake that I kind of just overlooked his knight taking. It doesn't lose, but I am worse. I am worse in this position. However, it's still very equal, and I played b5, trying to get him to take and blunder mate. He doesn't. But it is still an issue. So he gives me a check. We trade rooks. King h2. And here I thought he kind of had to. Oh, sorry, he can't take. I thought he was gonna go like knight here, or kick my knight out. But he does kick my knight out. So I take first. Important, you do not just take my knight because I will push and promote my pawn, and you will be lost. Actually, this isn't even the best way to do it. I take, and you can't bring your rook back. So there you go. He doesn't do that. He takes a pawn, and I jump back with my knight, attack his rook. He goes there, and here he's attacking two. Sorry, I cannot draw arrows today. He's attacking 2 pawns, so I just take, and it's a knight in 5 versus knight in 5. This is a dead draw. It just is. So it is, however, white who's a little more active. I am playing for a win here. And here he makes his first mistake. He pushes this pawn. So here what he should have done is probably push this pawn, because it dislodges my knight, and it doesn't really give me the best squares to go to. But it's fine. Okay, it's still a draw. And here, I'm like, okay, I'm going to reroute my knight, try and get to f4. And here he goes here. I'm like, okay, well, I'm still going to go to f4. If he trades, I take and his pawns get split, so I have to be at least better at that point. And we get exactly that. And here I'm like, okay, I think I'm winning. I'm winning now. It is no longer a draw. And once I saw g6, I'm like, okay, I am winning. I go king g5. He goes back. I could have... The engine wants king h6 here. But I'm like, okay, I just pushed my pawn. And I took this pawn first. Because these pawns aren't going anywhere. They are never going to get past my g-pawn. And I'm like, okay. This was a good move. It stops me from going back and just winning this pawn. So I push, he goes here, and I win this pawn. And you'll see, he tries to push these pawns, I just take. And similar tactic to the last game. He's forced to take this pawn, and I will simply promote. I take this pawn, and I do it the simple way of just promoting, getting 2 queens. And it is simply mate on the board, and I win game 2. So just only really one mistake from my opponent. I was very upset because again I wanted to do really well, and I knew this was a draw, and then I was very happy to see him trade knights because I knew I was winning. That was really my opponent's only mistake. It was a very balanced game. In fact, I was the one who was losing out of the immediate opening. Okay, going into game 3 now. I'm once again with the black pieces, and we get e4, e6. Except this time, I did not have the luxury of playing knight f6, so I played c5. We get this line, and this is another line I was trying to get myself into, and it was just this. Trade down, play knight e7, and here my opponent immediately loses the pawn. As soon as the bishop comes to here, you either have to move back or you have to take. I don't think it's great to take, so I would move back personally, but he doesn't, and I take his pawn, and the point is, if you take, if you take, I take, and if you take like you did in the game, I just recapture with my knight, and you can no longer take it. So here, I have two slightly underdeveloped knights, but I'm up a pawn. And he goes here, so I move my knight away, attacking his other knight. He defends it, and I thought this was very weird, so I played h6, because his knight has to go back. And it's kind of like, what are these knights doing? So he brings it back to the center, makes perfect sense, but I just attack it again. Like, I was very confused on what his knights were doing this game. So, and then here was an odd move. Because at first, I was very thrown off by this move. I'm like, okay, I can force the trade of rooks somehow, but he's probably going to double. And then I'm like, wait, how is he going to double his rooks? This move makes no sense. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to double my own rooks. First, he moves this queen here. And I thought this was also odd because wherever he goes, it's just going to be a weird spot to have his queen. And we trade both sets of rooks. And he gives me another pawn. I was very worried for a sec that I would have this, but I decided that just this, and if queen takes, I can take, and wherever he goes, I'll be winning. So I wasn't too worried about this position. He doesn't go for that. He goes for a weird b6. I don't know. I just brought my knight back. And here, I decided to bring my queen in. Because if he takes, like he does in the game, I was going to take. The only move I really thought of here was like, if he tries to go queen here, and I'm like, okay, I can just take. I'm up 2 pawns. This should be winning fairly easily. He doesn't do that. He just trades queens and goes for my pawn. I defend it. He attacks it. I take. Very important not to just play like a waiting move because this is probably a draw now. So take. And notice he has 4 split pawns. I have 4 connected pawns and then another 2 connected pawns. And here, I thought of playing g5 here, stopping his king from getting here, and then I decided once his king comes here, I can just play g5 now, and then trade knights. And here, I'm just winning. I should have taken with my f pawn in hindsight because that way he doesn't get a pass pawn. So I take here, and it was actually in this position that my opponent resigned the game. He could have tried something like this, except I'm simply too fast, and I will probably, yeah, I'm more than happily winning this endgame. So yeah, another clean game. So I'm very happy with my score. I'm 3 out of 3 going into game 4, and there's only one other person with 3 points, and that is obviously my next opponent. And so yeah, let's just get into the next game. I have white again, and I was very happy. So we get another Queen's Gambit. I play knight f3, and I go into this. And he goes back, and I'm like, okay, that's odd. I'm just going to go to my typical Catalan. And here I played the wrong move order. Oh, that's not. Hopefully no one saw that. Here I played the wrong move order. I meant to play Queen c2 here. Sorry. Here, I'm meant to play queen c2, go after the pawn immediately. But I played this for some reason, just forgetting the move. And here, I am already at a disadvantage. I'm playing against his pawns, essentially. Here, I go back. I wanted to trade, but then realized I couldn't. So I trade here. He doesn't let me trade. And here I'm worse, but I'm not lost until now. I just lost a piece. So I'm like, okay, well, I can try and attack him. I shuffle around, and it wasn't until about here where I was definitely losing. I was just kind of trying to make threats on his king, and here it's actually funny. Let's say you go here for some reason. I can actually take, and if you take, it's just mate. So, like, the threats are there, but he plays accurately and defends them. And here is when, if this was a normal game, this is when I resign. The point is, if you go here, okay, where's my attack? I just have nothing. I just resign. So I'm like, okay, attack his bishop, defend my pawn. He goes back, attacks my rook, and pushes his pawn. And I'm like, okay, this is probably where I lose. Let's pin his knight to his queen and maybe make a threat. And here, he pushed it again, and I'm like, okay, rook c1. Here, queen blocks. And here he has a very easy finish of takes, queen, takes, and he's simply winning. He's just up an entire rook and a piece. To my luck, though, he doesn't do that. He plays queen g4. Queen takes g4, winning another piece. And here, he forked my rook, my other rook, and again, I usually would just resign this position. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to take. He takes my rook with check, and then takes. He doesn't take, sorry. He offers a queen trade. I'm like, hell no, I'm going to sack my rook. I wanted you to take it. And here's where it gets interesting. The computer immediately wants him to block. But first we repeat, and then he does that. Okay. And I should point out, the computer has this at like mate in 11 or something like that for black. So I'm just trying to give checks, maybe pull off a perpetual, and he hangs a rook. He's supposed to go here or here, just soak up all the checks until there are none. And I take this with check, go here, it's the only check in the position. And here, I'm like, damn. I'm probably going to lose this game. I have no more checks. I'll attack his rook. And then he goes here, and it was very interesting to me. I thought he was just going to kind of hug his king, but he doesn't, so I give him a check. And he blunders this. Like, it's still winning, except he just didn't take back, so I took his rook with check. Or he didn't go back, rather. And I think it was in this position where the computer is like, yes, it's a draw, you will finally get perpetual. So I go here, and he brings his king forward. And I'm like, wait. His king doesn't have many squares to go to. Do I have an attack? Can I attack his king? So I go, give queen e8. Queen e8 check. I force his king either to go here or here. And he goes here, and I'm like, and it's actually mate in 2 in this position. I can go here, here, and it's mate. I missed that. It is still mate, though. I go here. Force his king back, I go here. His bishop comes up, I go here, and it's the same thing. And I somehow managed to win this game. Keep in mind, I was in this position, and I end in this position. I got incredibly lucky in this game, but I do go up 4-0, or 4-4, putting me 1 point above any other player in the field. There were 4 people on 3, however, and I didn't want to risk losing first place on tiebreakers. So, like, say I lost the game, I might have gotten second or third. So I go into my next game wanting to win still, obviously, plus rating. I want to gain rating as much as I can. And we are against our final opponent with the black pieces, and we get yet another French defense. This time it's an exchange, very dry. We're just developing, trading pieces, typical French. And it wasn't until here where we get any sort of imbalance, where he's playing on his open rook file. I have a strong dark squared bishop. He's staring down. We're both staring down the e file, and he jumps in with his rook. So the immediate threat is knight c6, which attacks my queen and this piece, and opens up the rook for another attacker. So I have to act quickly. Actually, like this game actually gets very intense very quickly from here. So I jump in with my knight first, blocking out the rook and attacking his queen. Okay, he brings his queen to the b file. I'm not winning on the b file anytime soon. So I attack his rook, or at least I add an attacker to his rook, and he attacks my knight. So I go back and add another attacker to his rook. He moves back, and I decide, okay, I'm going to trade bishops. And he does, doubling my pawns. He goes here, going for the pawn. So naturally, I play f6, attacking his knight, and defending my pawn as well. And this is his only really good move, and I play queen f5. So just bringing my queen to an active square, we trade rooks. That was another part of queen f5 I get to take back with my rook. And he goes for my pawn. And okay, so immediately I wanted to play this. Like my idea was queen d6 or queen d3. Point is takes. How do you stop this pawn? And you kind of can't. Like if you try and do this, I'm taking, and all of a sudden I have a queen. So it's not very simple. So I go, but I chicken out last second effort. I genuinely forget the reason why, and I just defend my pawn. I didn't want to risk anything. I didn't want to risk losing this game because I was down too many pawns. So he recaptures the b file, and now I go for my queen d6 idea. Or queen d3, sorry. He brings his rook back, good move, defending his queen. However, I thought I'm just going to take, give a check, and go for this pawn. And he makes a good move here. He goes for my pawn. He couldn't really defend this, so he goes for my pawn. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take this pawn. You're going to take this pawn, but I'm going to take with my knight and try and trade. And we do. And he pushes. I thought this was weird because I just kind of cut it off with my king. And as I'm doing that, he makes a maneuver towards my kingside pawns. And I thought this was very weird because he allowed rook d3, and at this point I'm just winning because I no longer care about these pawns. I was careful though. I played rook f4, defending my f pawn, and I slowly bring my king around, attack his rook, and here I have to kind of maneuver a bit. And actually, oh my bad. Here I was played a little bit inaccurately. I should just play here because if you take, I just queen. But it's fine. Here, and it's now rook in 3 versus king in 4, and I easily take it to this position, and it was in this position my opponent resigned the game, putting me at 5 points out of 5 games, putting me in first place in section D. I'll be the first to admit I was overrated in this group. In my last tournament I scored 3.5 out of 5, and I lost rating. I was unrated at the time, so they kind of based my rating off of that tournament. So they decided I would be in Group D. I was the second highest rated player going into this, and I'm probably the highest rated player leaving. Hopefully I can get up to Group C or D, or Group C or B for my next tournament, which is on the 19th. And have a good performance in that group as well. I know I can perform at the highest level. My friend is in Group A, and I go back and forth with him quite frequently. So I know I can perform in the highest group. I just need to get there. And yeah, I'm pretty happy. Other than Game 4, I was pushing from start to finish in every game. So I'm pretty happy with my play. Other than that, though, thank you for watching. If you do want to see more of this, let me know, and I will try. And yeah. thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you later. If you want to watch me play chess live, I sometimes stream on Twitch. I'll catch you later. Peace out.